importance, because through that inquiry, in good part, we're going to get a better understanding of some of the plights of the children that we're actually talking about today, Mr. Speaker. I realize my time has already expired, but...
The honourable member, I thank the honourable member for concluding for the moment. He will have 7 minutes remaining for his speech following question period. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Fleetwood Port Kells.
Mr. Speaker, our celebration of Diwali is underway in Fleetwood Port Kells, across our city of Surrey, and indeed all across Canada. Our Hindu and Sikh community celebrates Diwali to signify the victory of light over darkness, good over evil, knowledge over ignorance, and hope over despair. It's also a time of renovation and renewal for many. What's so spiritually uplifting about Diwali for all of us is that it shares its theme with so many other faiths, the symbol of a divine light and the ultimate triumph of light over darkness, be it Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, or the lighting of the Sikh Golden Temple in Amritsar. That's a wonderful aspect of our society here in Canada. We are stronger because of our differences, not in spite of them. And in fact, we can all join in wishing our friends and neighbors a happy Diwali because, like them, all of us will in turn be lighting up our community with understanding, hope, tolerance, and peace.
Honourable member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, the United Nations agency created to celebrate education, science, and history has embarrassed and disgraced itself yet again, allowing itself to be used as a tool for hate. At the annual meeting of UNESCO's Annual World Heritage Committee, a resolution was passed that effectively denies Jewish and Christian ties to Jerusalem's Temple Mount, that ignores the importance of Jerusalem to the three monotheistic religions that share its history. Now, you know, Mr. Speaker, as the site of two biblical temples, Temple Mount is the holiest place in Judaism, as well as the Muslim holy site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, Al-Haram al-Sharif. Mr. Speaker, denying the existence of the Jewish temples is only a blood libel step away from denying the existence of Jews. Canada must strongly protest and condemn this latest hateful manipulation of our shared history.
The honourable member for Scarborough North.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to rise in the House today to mark this year's festivities for Diwali and Bandi Chor Divas. On October 30th, families across Canada will celebrate the Festival of Lights, awakening the night sky with sparkling diyas, lanterns, and firecrackers to remind us that light will always overcome darkness. In my riding of Scarborough North, I am delighted to be joining residents at the Scarborough Gurdwara and at the ISKCON Scarborough Temple to observe one of the most beautiful traditions of the Indian subcontinent. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, my parents were born and raised in Kolkata, India, before they immigrated to Canada over 40 years ago. As a Canadian of Hakka, Chinese, Indian descent, I'm proud to live in a country where our diversity is our strength. Occasions like Diwali showcased our shared values of freedom, inclusion, and equality. And as Canadians, we can all take a moment to celebrate. Joyeux Diwali.
Happy Diwali and Bandi Chor Divas. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing. Mr. Speaker, small businesses are the engine of our economy and they involve great risks for the business people, but when they're successful, these benefits are for the whole community. This is why I have the pleasure of paying homage to the winners of the Northern Ontario Business Awards this year.
On Entrepreneur of the Year for Relais Magpie Relay in Duberville, which draws snowmobilers from across North America. Birch Island's Wabatech Business Development Corp. Won the First Nations Business Award for Excellence for their involvement in 3,000 Aboriginal businesses. And Moonbeam's Northern Trust was named Company of the Year in the 1 to 15 employee category. Luc Bouchard mortgaged his home to start the business. Now it's the North's go-to outlet for the design and manufacturing of prefab and custom wood projects. The company's constant growth has created good full-time jobs along with work for students and seasonal employees. Contributions to schools, organizations, and sports teams show Northern Trust is a boon to the community. I'm sure all members will join me to congratulate these outstanding businesses for well-earned awards.
The Honourable Member for Brome, Missisquoi.
Had the chance to meet students from the University of Vermont and St. Michael's College to discuss about our political system. It's a great pleasure to see young Americans interested in Canadian politics. Comme vous savez,
as you know, Mr. Speaker, my riding is on the Vermont border, and it is critical that we highlight our trade with our southern neighbors. We have a very special relationship with them, and our border should testify to that. When I think of the automated customs pilot project at Morse's Line in Saint-Armand, I tell myself that that is the future. It's important to facilitate trade between our two countries through more flexible access at the border.
The member for Barrie Springwater, Oro-Medonte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I want to raise awareness on the current situation in Ethiopia. Protests began in November of 2015 after the central government attempted to infringe on the population's land rights, and these protests are still ongoing. Recently, 1,600 civilians have been detained for peacefully demonstrating against the government. Human Rights Watch says at least 500 people have been killed in clashes with security forces to date. This month, the government has declared a state of emergency, severely restricting the access of diplomats and cutting off internet access. While there is a lot that is unknown at this point regarding what's happening in Ethiopia, Canada should be monitoring the situation with concern. As members of Parliament in Canada, we need to call on the Ethiopian government to ensure that freedom, democracy, and human rights are protected in the region. Our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Ethiopia.
The honourable member for Brampton North.
Mr. Speaker, this October 30th, over 1 billion Hindus, Jains, Sikhs, and some Buddhists around the world will be celebrating Diwali and Bandishore Divas with their friends and family and their whole community. Diwali is known as the Festival of Lights and one of the biggest celebrations for these faiths. It signifies the victory of light over darkness, hope over despair, and the freedom from oppression. We as Canadians can take this message home with us and understand the importance of self-inquiry, self-improvement, and always trying to seek the good and right path. We must never forget to fight for those others' freedoms and not just our own. Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to be Canadian because nowhere else will we find people of all faiths and all beliefs coming together to celebrate others' festivals. To my colleagues and all Canadians, I wish you a very happy and joyous Diwali and Bandishore Divas. Thank you.
The honourable member for Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, I'm so pleased to stand today as a co-chair of the All-Party Diabetes Caucus. Today is a Diabetes on the Hill for the Canadian Diabetes Association, hence these pins. I spent 18 years working in healthcare, especially as a diabetes educator and research coordinator. For me, I committed that as an elected representative, I would speak up about diabetes, which affect 11 million Canadians, and it can lead to serious complications. It is a burden on healthcare system, on many families. On Tuesday, we had our first meeting on the Diabetes Caucus in partnership with CDA. It was a very productive. I thank all members for attending. Please join us for the next one. And please give me a warm welcome. Please give them a warm welcome to the Canadian Diabetes Association representative here today. They are doing a great job. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Montmagny, Niner, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk to you today about chaîne de vie, which is something that happened following a student in my riding. And on October 16th, chaîne de vie was carried out to highlight the Organ Donor Day in the world. And the intention of this project is to raise awareness of high school students of this issue of organ donations. Signing your consent forms in Quebec is one thing that you can do, but it's not enough. It's the family that has the final word, and you have to discuss this issue with them. I have the greatest admiration for Lucy, who founded this subject and has opened up the discussions. You have to talk about organ donations within your family. I've signed my card. Have you signed yours? I hope that Chaîne de Vie will become a Canadian project. Thank you.
For Cloverdale, Langley City.
Mr. Speaker, Le 30 octobre, les Sikhs, les Hindus.
On the 30th of October, Sikhs, Hindus, Jains, Buddhists, and around the world got together to celebrate Diwali and Bandi Chor Divas.
Triumphant representation of good over evil, hope over despair, and knowledge over ignorance. For the over 1 million Canadians who practice Sikhism and Hinduism, Diwali is one of the most cherished days of the year. Oh, Canada,
In Canada, as elsewhere in the world, it's an occasion to get together with their loved ones to celebrate the good things in life.
It's a Canadian diversity and highlights our shared values of tolerance, respect, and compassion. This Sunday, Dia lanterns will light homes and communities across this country in a spectacular celebration of light over darkness. I join my community and others across the country in wishing a very happy Diwali and Bandi Chor Divas to all those celebrating with their families and loved ones. Thank you.
Well, member for Calgary Skyview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Assalamu alaikum. I stand in the House today to denounce the acts of vandalism against Calgary mosques and ranchlands and the Southeast Islamic Center in Queensland, along with negative posters directed towards Muslims that have appeared in Calgary and Edmonton. Islamophobia is a serious problem that makes many Canadians from the Muslim community feel unsafe and unwelcome. The people who are responsible for these acts must be brought to justice. We must also educate Canadians about the positive influence that members of the Muslim community have in building a stronger and more inclusive nation. I stand in solidarity with our Muslim brothers and sisters to offer my support to ensure they feel as welcome in this nation as all other Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Grand Prairie Mackenzie.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Farmers in the Peace Country are some of the hardest working people in this country. During harvest, they start long before the sun rises, and work continues long after the sun sets. Farm families set everything aside to ensure that they can harvest the crops that they grow to feed the world. This harvest, it's been very, very difficult. Wet weather has hindered operations throughout the Peace Country, and much of the crop remains in the field unharvested. I grew up in the farm, so I know that there's always hope that the harvest will be complete. But I also know that if the harvest doesn't get done soon, it will create incredible financial hardship for the farm families across the Peace Country. I will do everything in my power to ensure that this bad situation doesn't get worse. I will fight to ensure that the crop that has been harvested can get to rail transportation. And I will also fight the Liberal plan to raise taxes on farm fuel, fertilizer, farm equipment, and grain transportation. Mr. Speaker, we cannot make a bad situation worse.
The honourable member for Brampton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise in the House to speak about Diwali, a festival of lights and joy. Festivals awaken our inner lights and spirituality. True festivities and inner happiness comes only if there is economic prosperity. I compliment government for the leadership role in the field of innovation, science education and economic development because it is the key to our economic growth. I, on behalf of Bramptonians, their council and their member parliaments, thanks government for a Diwali gift of new university in Brampton, which was long overdue. This university will provide best education to our kids, grandkids, and prepare them for the suitable jobs and have their best living standard. Let me wish all Canadians happy Diwali, happy Bandi Chor. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, many are growing concerned by recent statements by the Minister of Environment and Climate Change that she is, and I quote, in quotes, as much as an economic minister as I am an environment minister, end of quotes. This is profoundly troubling, not only because the Minister of Environment and Climate Change is the only voice mandated in Cabinet to defend the environment. Her opinion contradicts the mandate of her ministry as clearly prescribed in law and her mandate letter. The Environment Act precisely dictates her powers, duties and functions to include preservation and enhancement of the quality of environment, renewable resources, including migratory birds, flora and fauna, water, meteorology, enforcement of laws on boundary waters and other transboundary matters, ensuring environmental quality, no mention of economic development. The mandate letter issued by the Prime Minister reiterates these duties, adding the duty to act to combat climate change, pursue clean energy and environment agreements, complete robust species recovery. No mention of any duty to balance the environmental protection with economic development. The question is, why has the minister now chosen to undermine her clearly prescribed environmental mandate?
Mr. Speaker, today marks International Religious Freedom Day. As Canadians, we've rarely had to worry about threats to our right to believe and practice our faith. However, we increasingly find basic freedoms around the world under basic freedoms such as freedom of religion under threat around the world. An astounding 76% of the world's population faces some sort of persecution for their beliefs. Last week, MPs continued to debate what Canada's response should be to the genocide faced by the Yazidi religious minority. Conflict has forced them from their ancient home on Sinjar Mountain. Their villages have been destroyed. Men have been tortured and killed. Women and girls sold into sexual slavery, all for little more than their faith. There are also lesser-known cases of those who suffer for their beliefs, such as the Baha'i in Iran, Falun Dafa in China, the Rohingya in Myanmar, or Christians in over 60 countries. As lawmakers and Canadians, let's take a moment to remind ourselves of how blessed we are to enjoy the basic freedoms we take for granted. Today, on International Religious Freedom Day, let's reaffirm our support for the most fundamental human right.
The honourable member for Brampton West.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to observe Diwali, the Festival of Lights, and Bandi Chhor Divas, festival celebrated by Sikhs, Hindu, Jains, and Buddhists around the world. This weekend, Gurdwara Sikh Sangat and Gauri Shankar Mandir in Brampton West will hold Diwali prayers, celebration, and firework displays. During Diwali, it is important to reflect on how we can incorporate compassion, forgiveness, and kindness into our lives. And as we light our divas with our families and friends, I encourage Canadians to think about how we can introduce light into the lives of others. Mr. Speakers, to all those celebrating in Brampton West, across Canada, and around the world, happy Diwali and Bandi Chhor Divas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, before being elected, the Prime Minister repeatedly called for the Canadian Forces missions in Iraq and Syria to be, quote, open and transparent. But yesterday in this House, he admitted that it was his order to suppress information about our mission in Iraq. He's suppressing information not for the safety of our troops, but because he claims they're on a training mission when they're not. They're in combat. Since the mission has changed and expanded, doesn't the Prime Minister think Parliament, Canadians, and the families of the soldiers have a right to know?
Honourable Minister of Transport.
Speaker, we are very proud of the role that our Canadian forces are performing in Iraq to defeat Daesh. Our training, advise, and assist role is an extremely important one to the coalition, as well as the other roles that we are fulfilling. We are doing our job at the moment within the coalition. It is important that we do not jeopardize the operational security of our forces, considering that Daesh is an extremely sophisticated organization in terms of gathering intelligence. We have to protect our troops. Thank you.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this line is ridiculous, that to not give information to Parliament, Canadians, and the families of soldiers after the fact, after the missions, is ridiculous. Parliament has a right to know, Canadians have a right to know, and the families of soldiers have a right to know if this mission has changed. Has it changed? Has it expanded? Are we just doing training as the Prime Minister suggested, or are we in combat?
Honourable Minister of Transport.
As I've said, Mr. Speaker, we are performing an extremely important role of training, advising, and assisting the Peshmerga specifically. We also are providing intelligence, some tactical aircraft support. We will be finalizing our installation of a medical facility in Iraq. We are an important and well-respected contributor to the coalition. We are doing our job. We must ensure, however, that we do not jeopardize the operational security of our Canadian troops.
Chef de l'Opposition.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Team are now under investigation by the Federal Lobbying Commissioner for their Cash for Access fundraising. It's clear that his rules for open and accountable government were nothing more than a prop. Under his orders, ministers are repeatedly violating his own ethics rules. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister knows that this is wrong. Everybody knows this is wrong. It's damaging the integrity of his office. So why doesn't he just stop doing it?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the federal rules are some of the strongest in the country. In fact, in some provinces, individuals can donate in the tens of thousands of dollars, and in others, they do not have any limits. Some provinces accept donations from unions, trade associations, and corporations. That is not the case in the federal system. Federal politics is subject to some of the strictest political financing legislation and regulations in the country, and we fully comply with the rules. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lac-Saint-Jean.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, last March, just 7 months ago, my colleague for Louise Saint-Laurent gave the Prime Minister a letter from Lucie Laperle. Now, in this letter, she listed the problems she was having with the Canadian Armed Forces and with discrimination. This is very serious. Will Ms. Laperle have to pay $1,500 to go to a fundraising event to speak to them?
Minister of Transport.
The Honourable Minister of Transport. I thank my colleague for the question. We clearly recognize in this country that we have committed errors in the past. Not only the government, not only the Department of National Defence, but society as a whole. We've evolved since then. We've changed. We recognize the importance of recognizing the equality and dignity of every man and woman serving in the armed forces. And this is the approach that we will continue to defend here in Canada. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, this morning, the Parliamentary Budget Officer revealed that over the last year, 50% of the jobs that were created, that number was equivalent to the last 5 years of jobs created. So we created twice as many jobs, but then when the Liberals came in, things stopped working. So can they tell us what they're going to start doing as of today? Because your plan doesn't work. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development. Social Development, rather. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to remind everyone that Canadians elected a government that has chosen to invest in the middle class, to invest in the future of our economy, to create jobs now and to create jobs in the future. This is part of a vision of sustainable economic development that is good for the middle class, and it is an inclusive approach that leaves no one behind.
Made it clear that they will not accept CETA if it includes investor state rules. These rules give foreign companies privileged access to sue governments in exclusive courts over environmental protections, worker safety, or any other laws a company feels may threaten their profits. And yet, they're still a part of the draft agreement. Mr. Speaker, Europeans want this deal fixed. Canadians want this deal fixed. Will the minister commit to removing investor state provisions from this deal?
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I am frankly astonished that the NDP can't get behind a deal that today has the full support of all progressives across Europe. Last week, the Chairman Vice Chancellor, a Social Democrat, said that, and I quote, CETA is a good and modern agreement, providing us with a great opportunity to set fair and good rules for ongoing globalization. Manuel Valls, the Socialist Prime Minister of France, backs CETA. Are there any trade deals the NDP will support?
No.
Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. The minister still doesn't understand that we're not ready to accept any old agreement with Europe. We want a good agreement. Mr. Speaker, the minister says that the free trade agreement with Europe is a done deal. But to date, there's been no compensation for dairy farmers. There's nothing about drug prices. And the Belgians are still against the idea that corporations can take governments to court before secret tribunals. Will the minister finally respect people's concerns here and fix this bad deal, yes or no? The Honourable Minister of Trade. We've negotiated a progressive deal. I'm astonished that the NDP is not behind it. This is an agreement that has the support of the provinces, including Quebec. We have worked in close collaboration with the government of Quebec, which recognizes all of the work that we have done over the last few days. Quebecers have the right to know whether the NDP supports CETA or not. Does the NDP support this progressive agreement that will create thousands of jobs across the country? The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Well, unlike the Liberals, we won't support agreements that were negotiated by the Conservatives. The Prime Minister wrote to his ministers that they should behave in a way that would stand up to public scrutiny and should even avoid the appearance of conflict of interest. This is clearly written in the mandate letters. Today, the Ethics Commissioner said that she was willing to take the Prime Minister's rules and include them in her own mandate. That's excellent news. If he doesn't want to apply his own rules, will he at least be ready to give the Ethics Commissioner the power to do so in his place? The Honourable Government Leader and Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, fundraising rules are among the strictest rules in the country. In other countries, people are allowed to spend tens of thousands of dollars. Other countries have no limit whatsoever. They even allow some people to accept donations from corporations, unions, and other business organizations. Our federal system does not allow parties to accept such donations. All members and all parties conduct fundraising, and they all need to follow the same rules. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Essex.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if these cash for access fundraisers don't break the law, then clearly the law is broken. The Prime Minister is defending this cash for access scheme, even though it clearly violates his own ethics rules. Today, the Ethics Commissioner called these fundraisers unsavory and said, one wonders whether people are getting unfair access. Since his ministers aren't abiding by his rules and the Prime Minister refuses to enforce them, will he now allow the Ethics Commissioner to enforce these rules for him, yes or no?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as I have said time and time again, federal politics is subject to some of the strictest political financing legislation and regulations in the country. When the rules are followed, no conflicts of interest can exist, and we will continue to follow the rules. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government is overstretching the Canada Pension Plan. We know that under the Liberal plan, workers will pay $1,000 more per year, and businesses will have to pay $1,000 more per year for each worker. This is not a good thing. Now, CBC has reported that an internal report from the Finance Department informed the government that if they go forward with this, the plan will harm job growth, not for the next 2 or 3 years, but for the next 20 years. We've been saying this for weeks, and I'd like the Finance Minister to confirm it. Will the Minister agree? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I thank the member for Louis Saint Laurent for his interesting question. Mr. Speaker, we've said that enhancing the CPP will have a long-term positive impact on the Canadian economy. Mr. Speaker, when we did our budget consultations, Canadians were clear. They wanted a strengthened and enhanced CPP to ensure their safe retirement in the long term and to be able to have a dignified retirement. That's exactly what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. And our steps will help this generation and future generations in this country. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, it's too bad that he's not listening to the Finance Minister, because all economic experts recognize that it's time to downgrade their economic growth forecasts. And what is the Liberal solution to this problem? Impose a Liberal carbon tax, increase pension contributions for all workers, and not cut taxes for businesses. So, Mr. Speaker, in such a situation, when will the government finally understand that it needs to work in the interest of all Canadians? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I again thank my honourable colleague. What Canadians understand and what my colleague does not understand is that when interest rates are low, that's the time to invest in the Canadian economy. That's exactly what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. We invested in the middle class by reducing taxes for them. That was the first step we took, Mr. Speaker. We made historic investments in infrastructure, $120 billion over 5 years. We have a plan for investing in innovation. And this is not only recognized in Canada, it's recognized all across the world by the World Bank, by the International Monetary Fund, and by other organizations.
Lethbridge.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister made a promise to Canada's young people. He said that he would create jobs and improve their economic future. Unfortunately, it would appear that the Finance Minister didn't get the memo. He told Canada's youth that they'll just simply have to accept the fact that they will move from job to job to job. It's no wonder that youth were heckling the Prime Minister and calling on the Liberals to honour their broken promises. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister direct his Finance Minister to keep his promise to build a better economic future for Canada's young people, or will he just continue to sit on the sidelines?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Employment.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Canadians know, and certainly the stakeholders that I meet with, they recognize that there's an evolving job market out there, particularly for young Canadians, and that's why we've made historic investments in skills training and education. These, in turn, will yield good-paying jobs. We've made investments like $1.5 billion in student grants. We've provided almost $170 million for youth employment strategy, $330 million for Canada Summer Jobs that created 80,000 summer jobs. Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect investments like that, and we are making.
The honourable member for Lethbridge.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't realize that these retail jobs and fast food jobs were evolving and good paying, as the honourable member says, opposite of me. Look, the Finance Minister has written youth off completely, simply saying that they're going to bounce from retail jobs to fast food jobs and somehow they're just going to have to make this work. That's just not going to cut it for this generation. They want to build their own businesses. They want hope for a vibrant future. But the problem is that young entrepreneurs are losing hope. They're losing hope of being successful because they're being taxed to death. They're being punished by this government's ill decisions. So is the Prime Minister deliberately promising our nation to be
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, that's the reason why this government has invested $800 million in terms of innovation, and that's why we're working on an innovation plan. That is the reason why members of Parliament have had many round tables. Over 1,400 ideas have come in for Canada's innovation plan, and that's the reason why we're going to be building that modern, new kind of jobs so that young people have the opportunity to have great careers in clean tech, in digital and in the numeracy, and making sure that we have jobs and prosperity for all Canadians for years to come.
Having trouble hearing the answer, I'd ask members to listen and not to be interrupting when someone is speaking. The honourable member for Carleton.
A secret finance department analysis shows that the CPP tax hike will not only cause 40 years of economic damage, but also, quote, raising CPP contribution rates for employers and employees will reduce workers' take-home pay and increase employers' wage bills. Lower take-home pay may reduce the number of hours workers are willing to work. Surprise, when you tax hiring and work, you get less hiring and work. Why would the Finance Minister bring in a new tax that his department said would be a job killer?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable colleague for the question. Mr. Speaker, we were clear with Canadians that CPP enhancement will have a net positive long-term impact on their economy. Mr. Speaker, as we went around in the country, Canadians want to have a secure, strong and stable retirement. That's why last June, Mr. Speaker, well, the members should be happy that last June, Mr. Speaker, we were able to get an agreement with provinces in order to enhance CPP, something they were never able to do. And enhancing CPP, Mr. Speaker, is what Canadians are looking forward, because Canadian wants to retire in dignity, and by enhancing CPP, we're going to create growth in this country. That's the right policy for Canadians. That's the
member for Carleton.
Today, the PBO released its annual jobs assessment. It showed unemployment down across the U.S., G7, and OECD, but up in Canada, where we had a net loss of 6,000 full-time jobs. Plus, average hours worked down. 40,000 mining and resource jobs gone. 20,000 manufacturing jobs gone. When will the Prime Minister accept the evidence that tax, borrow and spend has failed?
Honourable Minister of Social Development. Order. I know everyone's enthusiastic today, looking forward to the answer, but we need to hear the answer from the Honourable Minister of Social Development.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'avais...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was eager to provide a good answer to my colleague's excellent question, and I believe he'll be pleased to hear how serious our government is in our desire to invest in the economy now, an economy that will help the middle class grow, that will be good for the future, and that will put us on a sustainable, inclusive path, leaving no one by the wayside, and a path that will create hope and enthusiasm for all young people who want to participate in this great country. The Honourable Member for Abitibi, Bay James, Nunavik. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, our motion to end discrimination against First Nations children is being debated in this House. The Liberals claim that they have applied Jordan's principle, but the tribunal clearly told the government that they would have to implement the full definition of that principle. Since the House adopted the terms of this resolution in 2007, will the minister do more than simply saying nice words in the House and fully implement Jordan's principle? The Honourable Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. Mr. Speaker, we welcomed the decision given by the tribunal, and we have taken concrete steps to follow up on those orders. We have allotted $630 million, and we have expanded Jordan's principle so that services are now available to more than 900 additional children, or they will be after July of this year.
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
900 kids, that's it? I mean, everyone in this House agrees that the First Nation child welfare system is underfunded. The question is whether this government will comply with the legal ruling ordering them to take immediate action. Right. And after 9 months and 2 compliance orders later, the government's notion of immediate becomes clear. Wait for it. More consultations and an online survey. They can consult all they want. The question is whether the Prime Minister believes he is above the law of the land while First Nation children are excluded by the law. So simple question, will they support our motion to bring their government into compliance with the Human Rights Tribunal ruling that orders the immediate action on the...
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
I repeat, we welcomed the tribunal's ruling and have taken concrete steps to address its orders. We've committed $635 million to address the funding gap, and we are overhauling the child welfare system. As today, a Manitoba chief said to me, unfortunately, the debate today is about money instead of the total reform of the system. The fact is that the status quo on First Nations child welfare is unacceptable, and we are committed to the real reforms that put children first.
Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I asked a question about the malaria drug mefloquine and its maker Apotex. Later today, our committee will hear from veterans who are suffering from the side effects of this drug. Veterans were shocked to learn that the finance minister has been lobbied by this company and will be hosted by an Apotex executive at a Liberal fundraiser. Unreal. An event that these veterans cannot afford to attend. How can our veterans trust the Liberals to do the right thing when their party is being financed by fundraisers organized by the chairman of Apotex?
Good question. Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, at the core of my mandate is the health and wellness of our veterans and their families. And I'm of the understanding that our veterans are testifying at committee, and I'd like to hear from them and feed that information into the work that we're doing. We will continue to work with our healthcare professionals throughout our department. The 4,000 are on standby, ready and willing and able to assist, and we'll continue to work on health and wellness issues for our veterans, full stop.
Honourable Member for Red Deer Lacombe.
It's more dodging, Mr. Speaker. The question was about ethics, not about veterans. Liberals refuse to answer these very simple questions. Veterans and all Canadians demand answers. Apotex is suing the federal government at the same time they're lobbying Liberal ministers while fighting our veterans. Meanwhile, the chairman of Apotex is raising money for the Liberal Party. Will the Prime Minister admit he and his ministers are not following their own rules and then bring someone in who will finally enforce them?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaker, I have said time and time again that the federal rules are some of the strongest in the entire country. And in fact, in some provinces, individuals can donate in the tens of thousands of dollars, and in others, there are no limits. Some provinces accept donations from unions, trade associations, and corporations. That is not the case in the federal system. So we know that all members of Parliament and all parties fundraise and will continue to abide by the rules. Thank you, Mr.
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Canadians don't believe the Liberals on the exclusive Cash for Access fundraisers. Now, we know the lobbying commissioner has opened an investigation into the Liberals' behaviour because, well, she doesn't believe them either. I'm not asking about election financing laws, and frankly, it's embarrassing for the Liberals to keep trying to hide behind them. Either the Prime Minister needs to start enforcing his own rules, or he should stand up and admit that he broke his promise to Canadians.
Hear, hear. The honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I'll repeat that the federal rules are some of the strongest in the country, and we know that all members of Parliament and all parties fundraise, and we all abide by the exact same rules. We have committed to following the rules, and we will continue to do so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member, l'honorable député de Richmond.
The honourable member for Richmond Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government likes to say one thing and do another. They say they're feminist, but they vote against a program that would improve maternity leave. They say they're pro-youth, but they vote against helping young people taking first aid courses. They say they want to run a modest deficit, but they let the deficit spiral out of control. They set ethics rules, but then they don't even respect them. Mr. Speaker, perhaps this is just what politics in 2016 is for the Liberal government, but I think they should walk the talk. Will the government House Leader or the Finance Minister repeat the same thing again, or will they finally give us a real answer? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, well, the answer is the answer. They asked a question and I gave them an answer. The truth is that our federal rules are some of the strictest ones in the country. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, this government was elected on the promise of a renewed nation-to-nation relationship and environmental action. Yet Aboriginal communities and environmental groups are again forced to pursue legal action, this time against the government for approving the Petronas LNG project. The government gave a green light to Petronas despite significant impacts to critical salmon habitat and a monumental increase in greenhouse gases. Why are they failing in their duty to protect First Nations fisheries and to combat climate change?
Here, here. Honourable Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member opposite for this question. This project underwent a 3-year rigorous scientific review that incorporated traditional knowledge and evaluated and mitigated the environmental impacts. It was the first time that we included Indigenous peoples in the technical working group reviewing the project. It's also the first time that we will have Indigenous communities working with the federal government and the province to monitor the project. The Indigenous communities beside the projects have impact benefit agreements with the proponent of benefiting significantly.
The honourable member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, for 2 weeks now, the HoC Nation have been living their worst nightmare as diesel washed up on their shores, wiping out critical fish habitat and putting their entire economy at risk. The HoC deserve compensation from a government who did so little, so late in their time of need. Instead of self-congratulatory mission accomplished from this fisheries minister, when is he going to actually compensate the families of Bella Bella who will lose their livelihoods this winter because of his department's incompetence? And when will the Liberals finally follow through on their commitment to protect BC's coast so this nightmare never happens again?
Honourable Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, we are also concerned about the impact on the HoC Nation. I've spoken to the Chief, Marilyn Slett. I will be meeting her again twice in the next 2 weeks. We are certainly recognizing the fact that we need to do better on marine security. We are looking at the issue of compensation. We need to improve the protection on all of our 3 coasts. That is why the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans and I have been working for months now, and we'll have some things to say very shortly.
Honourable member for Scarborough Rouge Park.
Mr. Speaker, Hurricane Matthew was devastating for Haiti, which is still barely recovering from the destructive earthquake that took place in 2010. The international community is mobilizing, but the needs are huge and there are epidemics threatening. The United Nations has announced that it is looking for $400 million to fund a cholera campaign. Can the minister inform the House of what action the government is taking to help the Haitian people? The Honourable Minister of International Cooperation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague. Since the beginning of the year, our government has invested $11 million in humanitarian assistance, and we have provide $8 million to UNICEF for water and drainage systems and to help with the cholera. We have increased funding as well to NGOs that provide direct help to Haitians, and we are working with the UN to see how we can help in the campaign against cholera.
Eastman. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have put an end to providing technical briefings on all military deployments. They put more troops in danger on the front lines against ISIS, removed their air combat support, and failed to provide adequate military care, or medical care. And the Prime Minister has not ruled out sending our troops into Syria. In opposition, he said, if the Prime Minister wants Canada to join a war, he first needs to make the case to Canadians. He can start by being open and transparent. Does the Prime Minister see this hypocrisy? When will he be transparent with Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, you'll recall that after long debate in this House many months ago, the government received a mandate to pursue this mission. That mission is in fact being pursued. There has been no change in the mandate. There has been no change in the mission. And there has been no change in the rules of engagement. So, Mr. Speaker, this mission is being pursued within the terms of the mandate as provided by this House, and briefings will be given as and when we can secure the safety of our troops.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, I think that the member is wrong because we have information from abroad that indicates that our military staff are engaging the enemy. We want to know why the government isn't transparent with us. They don't answer the question. They just say, oh, we're advising and assisting, which isn't true. Will the government tell Canadians the truth?
The honourable member inadvertently just gave me an illustration of the problem we face, which is he has, quote-unquote, information from abroad. Well, Mr. Speaker, we cannot, under any circumstances, react to information from abroad, which in fact will potentially jeopardize the security of our troops. And I'm sure that the honourable member would not wish to pursue the issue of jeopardizing the security of our troops.
For Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Well, the question is about transparency and being open with Canadians. Now, the Prime Minister is currently campaigning on the backs of 600 Canadian troops to earn a UN Security Council seat, even though he shamefully said yesterday that he blames soldiers for his lack of transparency. This comes from the Prime Minister who said last year the Liberal Party cannot support any military mission when the arguments to support it have not been presented in an open and transparent manner. So despite the Prime Minister's outrageous contradictions, will he tell Canadians exactly where, when, and why he has blindly committed our troops to an undefined UN mission in Africa?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I've been in this House for a long time, and I don't recollect the Prime Minister saying at all that he has committed the troops to Africa at any place, any time at this this time. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Defence took two of Canada's foremost experts, Romeo Dallaire and Louise Arbour, on a five-country mission. No decision has been made, and until and when that decision is made, we will then inform the House.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, I'll rephrase my question. I would say that We certainly don't want to put the troops in danger. We just want to know whether they are on the front lines. So I'd like to hear about that from the parliamentary secretary. We are hearing that we're going to get back into peacekeeping, but we don't have any details. So what kind of quagmires is going to be? How long is it going to last? But the government isn't telling Canadians anything. So will the minister finally be transparent about this mission to Africa?
What the honourable member is hearing, Mr. Speaker, is that the Minister of Defence made a 5-country trip through Africa. He took with him 2 of Canada's, if not the world's, foremost experts, General Dallaire and Justice Arbour. And both of those are experts in conflict resolution. At this point, no decision has been made, and so his question, if it is at all legitimate, is entirely premature.
The honourable member for Churchill, Kiewit-Nokaski.
Mr. Speaker, while the Prime Minister calls precarious work a fact of life and the Finance Minister says we should get used to it, Canadians have a different message for this government. Yesterday, 200 people attended our forum on Parliament Hill on the rise of precarious work in the millennial generation. We heard stories of unstable work and the need for national leadership. The Prime Minister likes to pass himself off as the Minister of Youth, but when young workers are facing a seismic shift, all he can do is shrug. When will this government admit precarious work is an issue of critical importance, and when will they take real action for...
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Employment.
Well, this government certainly does recognize the challenges that are facing our workforce now, and especially young Canadians. The Parliamentary Budget Officer, in his report, he recognized it. He said that the changing job market is offering different types of positions for young Canadians. He recognizes that investments have to be made, smart investments, necessary investments have to be made, and that's what this government is doing, Mr. Speaker. We're hoping that our investments will yield long-term, well-paid jobs for our young Canadians.
The honourable member for Loki St. Macky. Mr. Speaker, we know that very soon the UN will be voting on a resolution to ban nuclear weapons. Over 100 countries support this initiative, but not Canada. The Liberals have called in the past for nuclear weapons to be banned here in the House in 2010 and at their party convention earlier this year. When they were in the opposition, the Liberals were in favor of nuclear disarmament. So why are they refusing now to support initiatives that would ban these destructive weapons? The Honourable Parliament Secretary to the Minister.
Of course, our government is a long-standing supporter of the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and we will continue to work toward a world free of nuclear weapons in the most effective way possible. It's fairly important to note that no nuclear power is supporting this motion, but Canada is working toward a real, workable and effective solution that will bring all nuclear powers together. We remain committed to a world free of nuclear weapons in the most effective way possible. Thank you.
Honourable member for Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is International Religious Freedom Day. Sadly, many people around the world do not enjoy religious freedom, and a large number have had their freedoms limited by their own government. Being a refugee because of one's faith is a reality that all too many people around the world face. Today, will the government commit to expediting the refugee applications of people who are being persecuted because of their faith, such as Christians in northern Iraq?
Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Mr. Speaker, I am very proud of the fact that this government brought in 25,000 Syrian refugees over the space of 4 months. This has become praised around the world, and in addition to that, as the member knows, all parties supported the motion recently to welcome Yazidis to Canada, and our government is working on that plan right now.
Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, China has just passed a new law aimed at shutting down Christian house churches where over 70 million Chinese people worship. In the same week, Muslim parents in the PRC were told that they would be reported to police if they encouraged their children to participate in religious activities. I ask the minister to take this opportunity right now to specifically condemn these outrageous abuses of human rights. Will this government speak out clearly and specifically against the latest crackdown on religious liberty in China?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
I'd like to take this opportunity to discuss the Office of Human Rights, Freedoms and Inclusion, because we have a comprehensive mandate that includes all human rights, including, as I know is so important to the member office opposite, the freedom of religion. Moreover, we have all 135 ambassadors championing this comprehensive vision. It is entrenched in their mandate. It is central to their work. This allows Canada to be a more effective defender of universal human rights, which are universal, indivisible, and interdependent, and is properly reflected in the Office of Human Rights, Freedoms and Religion.
Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's interesting because while people around the world continue to suffer for their faith, there is complete silence from this Liberals' Office of Everything, this Office of Human Rights, Freedoms and Inclusion. Despite having 36 full-time employees and a budget 4 times that of the former Office of Religious Freedom, we've heard nothing from the minister on how this office is actually helping people on the ground. On this International Religious Freedom Day, we have historic levels of religious persecution around the world. Why are the Liberals finding it so difficult to take these issues seriously?
Parliamentary Secretary.
I'm very pleased to update the House on the Minister of Foreign Affairs' recent trip to Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico. We took a human rights activist from Canada on that trip. 80 to 90% of his time was focused on human rights, together with that activist. And you know what? Then he challenged his counterparts in those governments on their records. This person that went with him said this has been a sea change in terms of how the Canadian government addresses human rights, and not a single meeting was cancelled. In fact, more were met. Thank you.
Member for Halifax.
Mr. Speaker, on October 6th, the Minister of Canadian Heritage announced that Canada has accepted the invitation to be the guest of honour host country for the 2020 Frankfurt Book Fair. Can the Minister explain why the 2020 Frankfurt Book Fair is a priority for the government?
Honourable Minister of Heritage.
I'd like to thank, of course, the member of Halifax for his important question. The Frankfurt Book Fair is the world's most important marketplace for the book publishing industry. And being the guest of honor is a fantastic opportunity to enable and support Canada's world-class authors, artists and cultural entrepreneurs to maximize their full export potential, increase their competitive position on the international stage, and contribute to Canada's overall economic and social prosperity. Thank you all.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Saturday, the residents of Lac Mégantic will celebrate the reopening of Rue Frontenac, which was destroyed on July 6, 2013. This is an important step in our community's recovery. However, according to the current timetable, it will take 7 years for the important step of the rail bypass to be completed. So the Minister of Transport needs to act to give people hope. Can the Minister confirm today that the rail bypass will take place? The Honourable Minister, we are certainly monitoring very closely the work that is being completed, the study on the rail bypass for Lac Mégantic, and if we can speed things up, we will do so. But we do have to do the work properly, and we are eagerly awaiting the results of the study. The Honourable Member for Drummond. This morning, the Minister of Heritage appeared at the Official Languages Committee. She couldn't answer any questions. She didn't know whether the RCMP had set up a system to monitor bilingual service on the Hill. She couldn't name even one recommendation from the unanimous report on the Translation Bureau. I'll try again. Does the minister believe, yes or no, that official language services need to be provided by and for minority official language communities? The Honourable Minister of Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his questions. We don't seem to have the same reading of what happened in committee. I think that the members of the committee, with the exception perhaps of my colleague who asked the question, were pleased with the government's actions on official languages. So we want to make sure that we will reintroduce the French training at Saint-Jean-Richelieu. We're making sure that judges, where necessary, will be bilingual, and I would ask my colleague to raise this.
Speaker, the Port of Sydney has long been an essential asset to the economy of Cape Breton Island. Studies have shown that the construction of a second marine berth in the harbour will greatly enhance port traffic, especially the lucrative cruise ship sector. I previously made the Minister of Infrastructure aware of this important project in this House, and I'm hoping he can provide an update on whether or not the Port of Sydney is eligible for funding.
The Minister of Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the member for Sydney Victoria for his ongoing advocacy on this project. Infrastructure Canada has received an application for this project, and my department is working with the Port of Sydney and the province of Nova Scotia to review the business case. We know making such investments in regions like Cape Breton generate economic growth, create jobs, and leave a lasting legacy for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right. Honourable Member for Huron-Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Agriculture's Chief of Staff has been a walking, talking conflict of interest since he hired her. As we speak, a court is reviewing a private prosecution alleging that she committed perjury. Canadian farmers need to know that when the minister makes a decision, it's good for all farmers, not just Mary Jean. All Canadians can see the problem with Liberal ethics. Will the minister do the right thing, replace his chief of staff until her legal issues are resolved?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chief of Staff of the Minister is involved in her community in various ways. She is an accomplished business leader and professional, and she even received a Citizen of the Year award in her community. She has a remarkable record of service. She is also very involved in the agricultural sector and public service. She also met all requirements of the conflict of interest rules and the commissioner. Member for Rivière-du-Nord. On Tuesday, I asked the Prime Minister if the federal government intended to funnel even more money from Quebecers into Muskrat Falls. The minister said if the Newfoundland government seeks to have that loan guarantee extended, the government would look at that very seriously. So the Liberals seem to be having some difficulty with the truth, which is that these are ongoing negotiations. So why did the minister answer as if no discussions were taking place? Is it because they were worried about the Quebec government's reaction? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are developing clean energy to address the needs of the maritime provinces, and we're working closely with the promoters and the provincial government. There have been discussions, but no decisions at this point. The Honourable Member from Montcalm. We know what the Quebec government's reaction will be. Any federal assistance to Muskrat Falls will create a situation of unfair competition. After all, Hydro-Quebec developed without any assistance from Ottawa, and Newfoundland wants to compete on foreign markets. They must think we are pretty stupid. Will the minister commit that there will be no increase in the loan guarantee? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker? Well, what we can say is the Government of Canada is working closely with the Government of Quebec through our regional agencies to help the economy. We've invested $380 million in post-secondary institutions in Quebec. We've announced through our regional economic agency $300 million to help Quebec. We work closely with Quebec, and we will always support Quebec in improving its economy.
I would like to draw to the attention of honorable members the presence in the gallery of Mr. Jay Johnson, United States Secretary of Homeland Security. I would also like to draw to the attention of honorable members the presence in the gallery of the Honorable Brian Gallant, Premier of New Brunswick. And now I believe the Honorable Opposition House Leader has the usual Thursday question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I do have the Thursday question, and I think we have some indication that next week there may be a couple of things a little bit out of the ordinary, and so I'm looking forward to hearing what the government has planned. I'm hoping that maybe with the fiscal update, we may hear that there might be a reversal on the increased taxation and spending, but not sure if that will happen. So I wonder if the Honourable House Leader will let us know what's going to be happening next week.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. This afternoon, Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue debate on the opposition motion. Tomorrow, we'll start the debate on Bill C-29, the second Budget Implementation Act. We'll resume consideration of that bill next week as well.
Minister of Finance will present the fall economic statement. Following the speech, we will have debate for the remainder of the afternoon. On Wednesday, immediately after question period, the House will welcome the Rio 2016 Olympic and Paralympic